The towering glass walls of Blackwood Enterprises gleamed like frozen daggers under the sharp noon sun. Inside, the marble floors echoed the footsteps of men and women who feared to speak too loudly, to walk too slowly, or even to breathe too deeply. For at the heart of this empire stood Damien Blackwood, the billionaire with a gaze cold enough to freeze oceans. He sat at the head of a long steel conference table, the collar of his charcoal suit pressed razor-sharp, his silver cufflinks glinting like weapons. His expression was unreadable, not out of mystery, but because it was permanently etched in stone. The boardroom was silent. "Mr. Blackwood," his senior VP ventured carefully, "the numbers from the Taiwan division." Damien raised one hand. Just one. The man instantly silenced himself, shrinking into his chair like a child caught speaking out of turn. "You had 6 months," Damien said, voice calm yet slicing. 6, and yet you bring me losses. I don't do losses." He tapped a single manicured finger against the portfolio. "If I wanted excuses, I'd hire poets." He stood, each movement fluid and controlled. No one breathed. "You're fired." The words dropped like gunfire. And just like that, the man's entire career dissolved into silence. Damien turned away, indifferent. Power obeyed Damien Blackwood, and kindness was beneath him. Across the city, on a quieter, humbler street, Amara tucked a photo of her late mother into her bag. It was worn around the edges, but she carried it everywhere, like a compass. She adjusted her second-hand blouse and looked in the mirror. She smiled softly, but her eyes revealed nerves she couldn't hide. It was her first day at the Blackwood estate. Everyone in the city knew Damien Blackwood, stories of his cruelty, his money, and his disdain for people beneath his station were told like urban legends. And yet Amara needed this job for her siblings back home, for her own dignity. She whispered a prayer under her breath and caught the train. The Blackwood estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into a hillside, wrapped in high black iron gates and watched by silent security cameras. When Amara was buzzed through the gates, a guard looked her up and down before coldly pointing her to the side entrance. She walked in alone, clutching her bag to her chest. Inside, a woman in her 60s met her, stern-looking, but not unkind. "I'm Mrs. Greer," she said, "head housekeeper. You'll answer to me and Mr. Blackwood. Mostly him." She paused. "Don't try to be friendly. Just do your work, keep your head down, and stay out of sight." Amara nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She was led to the nursery, where a small girl sat cross-legged on the floor, building a tower of plastic blocks. Her golden curls shimmered under the sunlight pouring through the window. She looked up at Amara with wide, hazel eyes. "Hi," the girl said shyly. "I'm Lily." Amara knelt beside her and smiled. "Hi, Lily. I'm Amara. I'll be your new nanny." Lily blinked. "You smell nice." Amara laughed softly. "Thank you. Can I braid your hair?" "Maybe later," she whispered, brushing a curl from Lily's cheek. "Let's get to know each other first." That evening, Damien returned. The iron front doors opened, and silence fell over the entire household like a storm cloud. Amara had just finished preparing Lily for bed when she heard the echo of footsteps, sharp and precise. Mrs. Greer's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Mr. Blackwood is home." The hallway grew quiet. Damien entered the nursery like a shadow sliding across the floor. His eyes fell immediately on Amara. He stopped, stared, measured, and frowned. "You're the nanny?" "Yes, sir," Amara replied, standing straight, her voice quiet but steady. He scanned her from head to toe, his lip curling in distaste. I asked for someone professional. Not this. Amara said nothing. Her heart pounded. Lily ran up and hugged Amara's leg. She's nice, Daddy. I like her. Damien's jaw tightened. He turned to Mrs. Greer. Is this the best we could find? Mrs. Greer gave a slight nod. She came highly recommended. From where? A charity house? He sneered. Don't touch the child more than necessary. And stay out of the main wing. Your staff, not family. With that, he left. Amara stood frozen in place long after Damien left the room. His words lingered in the air, heavy and cruel, like smoke that clung to her skin. She forced a breath into her lungs and looked down at Lily, who still held her hand with innocent affection. I'm sorry, the little girl whispered. Amara crouched and smiled faintly. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. But Daddy was mean. Amara hesitated. What could she say? That her father, rich and powerful, treated people like dirt beneath his feet? That the man who should be teaching Lily love and acceptance was hollowed out by ego and ice? Instead, she kissed Lily's forehead. Sometimes, grown-ups forget how to be kind. We just have to show them how. Later that night, Amara unpacked her few belongings into the small room at the back of the house. A plain servant's quarter with one narrow bed, a dresser, and no windows. The air was still, heavy. Like the rest of the mansion, it smelled of luxury without warmth. She took out her mother's photo and placed it on the dresser. I'll survive this, she whispered, touching the frame. For Lily. For you. Meanwhile, Damien stood in his study with a glass of scotch, gazing out into the night like a man who expected the stars to bow before him. His jaw was set, eyes hard. He couldn't shake the image of Amara's face, not because he was drawn to it, not yet, but because it irritated him. That quiet defiance, the way she met his eyes without trembling, even when she should have bowed like the rest. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong in his house. And she certainly didn't belong near his daughter. The next morning, Amara rose before the sun and quietly moved through the halls, memorizing the layout of the massive estate. She prepared Lily's breakfast, dressed her, brushed her curls, and walked her to her tutoring room. Lily refused to let go of her hand. I don't like the old teacher, she whispered. She smells like paper. Amara giggled. Then we'll play a game later, okay? After your lesson. Lily nodded eagerly. In the days that followed, the pattern became clear. Amara did everything, gently, efficiently, and without complaint. Damien, in return, gave her nothing but silence or scorn. When she spoke, he ignored her. When she entered a room, he walked out. If she ever accidentally left a cup on the wrong table or touched Lily's things, he had them thrown out. Once she took a sip of tea from a mug shaped like a cartoon animal, Lily's favorite, and he demanded it be replaced, claiming staff contaminating family items was unacceptable. Even the staff learned to look away when Damien insulted her in front of them. She didn't cry in public, but she wept into her pillow every night. Still, Amara stayed. She stayed because Lily clung to her like sunlight. She stayed because the little girl needed warmth in a house made of stone, and because somewhere deep inside her, she refused to be broken, even by the infamous Damien Blackwood. One evening, as Lily played with a puzzle on the rug, she asked, Amara, are you my mommy now? Damien had just walked in. He stopped in the doorway. Amara's breath caught. No, sweetheart, she said gently. I'm your nanny, but I love you very much. Lily pouted. But you're soft like a mommy, and you smile like one too. Damien's hand clenched at his side. "That's enough," he snapped, voice like a whip. "She is not your mother. She is the help." Lily flinched. Amara stood and faced him. Her voice was low. "Please don't shout at her. She's just a child." His eyes narrowed. "And you're just a servant. Know your place." He turned to leave, but paused, throwing one last cruel comment over his shoulder. "You should be grateful. Someone like you even walks these floors." That night, Amara held Lily close until she fell asleep, then slipped quietly into the shadows of the hall. She stood by a window near the east wing and looked out over the city, her arms wrapped around herself. Every insult echoed in her chest. But she didn't cry this time, not because it didn't hurt, but because she refused to give him that satisfaction. From across the hallway, Damien passed by and saw her silhouette against the glass. He stopped, watching her, just for a moment, and for reasons he couldn't explain, something in her stillness unnerved him. It was too quiet, too strong, too real. He turned away before she could see him, and disappeared into the dark. Morning came, without warmth. The sun spilled into the mansion in golden shafts, but it did not bring peace. It merely illuminated the cold marble floors, the spotless glass, and the echoing emptiness of the Blackwood estate. Amara moved through the kitchen quietly, preparing Lily's breakfast. She'd woken an hour early after dreaming she was back home, laughing with her siblings. In the dream, her mother had braided her hair. She touched her braid now, fingers trembling slightly, then placed Lily's small bowl of oats with sliced bananas on the tray. Everything had to be perfect, down to the color of the spoon. Damien didn't tolerate errors. He didn't offer warnings. He issued consequences. Lily was still sleeping when Amara entered the nursery. The girl curled beneath her soft pink blanket, one hand tucked under her cheek. Amara sat beside her and gently brushed a golden curl off her face. "Time to wake up, sweet girl," she whispered. Lily blinked slowly, then smiled sleepily. "Hi, Mommy." The word was soft, innocent, and filled with trust. Amara froze. Her chest tightened. "I'm not your mommy, darling," she said gently. "I'm your Amara." "But I want you to be my mommy," Lily mumbled, wrapping her small arms around Amara's waist. Amara didn't speak. She simply held the little girl close and whispered, "I'll always love you, even if I'm not." Downstairs, Damien stood at the end of the breakfast table, sipping espresso as his assistant rattled off his schedule. He barely listened. His mind had drifted to the image he'd seen the night before. Amara standing silently near the window, her posture still and unreadable. She hadn't known he was watching. Something about that bothered him. Not her beauty. No, she wasn't his type. He preferred polished women, model thin, elegant, white, women who knew how to be useful and quiet. But Amara's silence hadn't been submission. It had been stronger than that. He set the espresso cup down harder than necessary. "Sir?" the assistant asked. "Nothing. Continue." Amara walked Lily to the courtyard for her morning reading. The sun was bright but not harsh, and the flowers were in bloom. "Can we play in the garden later?" Lily asked, swinging her legs. "If you finish your reading first. Will you wear your hair down?" Amara smiled. "Why?" "Because it's so long and pretty." Amara laughed softly. "We'll see." By noon, Damien had returned from a brief board meeting, irritated. One of the investors had questioned his numbers. Politely, but Damien hated being questioned. He stepped into the house with a storm already brewing in his chest, and there she was, Amara, in the sitting room with Lily. They were laughing. Lily was trying to copy her handwriting in a colouring book. Amara had taken off her shoes and sat cross-legged like a friend, not a servant. Damien's voice cut through the room like a whip. "What do you think you're doing?" Amara stood immediately, instinctively putting herself between him and Lily. You were disrespecting the house rules. Again." His eyes went cold. "On the floor like that? Barefoot? This isn't a playground." Amara looked at him, the warmth drained from her eyes. "She's a child. She needs joy, not silence." He stepped closer. "You are here to serve her needs, not teach her to disobey." Amara clenched her jaw. "She's 5, not a robot." Damien's voice dropped. "Watch your tone." Lily, frightened by his anger, ran to Amara and hugged her thigh. "Don't shout at her. I want her to stay." "Upstairs," Damien snapped. "Now!" Lily burst into tears and ran. Damien stared at Amara like she'd committed treason. "If she keeps calling you Mum, you'll be out of here so fast." "You'll break her heart," Amara said quietly. "Better than letting her get confused about who's worth what." That night, when Amara returned to her room, she found her drawer had been opened. Her small mug, the one she'd used to drink tea the day before, was gone. The housekeeper later confessed, "Damien had it thrown out. He said your lips shouldn't touch Lily's things." Amara locked the door and sat down on the bed. Her fingers trembled as she undid her braid. Each pull of her fingers felt like unraveling a knot in her soul. Then the tears came, quietly, shamefully. Not because she was weak, but because being humiliated every day, in silence, without fighting back, it tore pieces from her, piece by piece, word by word, look by look. She wept into her pillow, her shoulders shaking. No one heard her. The next morning, Amara rose before dawn again, her eyes puffy, though she did her best to hide it. She dressed quietly, tying her hair into a neat bun, her hands moving with the same care as always, but her heart was sore beneath her skin. She stepped into the kitchen and began preparing Lily's breakfast, but the usual gentle hum of morning routine was now laced with dread. Every motion felt heavier. She no longer felt invisible. She felt targeted. Still, she carried the tray upstairs. Lily sat curled on her bed with her stuffed bear when Amara entered. Her face lit up. "You came back." Amara's throat tightened. "Of course I did. I'll always come back for you." The child patted the bed beside her. "Will you sit with me a minute?" Amara placed the tray down, then sat beside her. Lily climbed into her lap without hesitation, her head resting under Amara's chin. "You're my favorite person," Lily mumbled. "When I grow up, I want to be just like you." Amara held her tightly, wishing she could freeze this moment forever, a moment untouched by rules or cruelty or names that cut like knives. Downstairs, Damien reviewed emails with one eye on the hallway camera feed. He saw them. Amara, sitting, holding his daughter. His daughter curled up in her arms, as if she'd belonged there her whole life. A muscle pulsed in his jaw. He stood, hands in fists. The confrontation came just before lunch. Amara had taken Lily to the solarium to work on her alphabet game, both laughing quietly when Damien appeared in the doorway like thunder in a tailored suit. "Out," he said, voice like stone. "Now." Amara stood, confused. "Is something wrong?" "I said get out." Lily clung to her. "No, don't send her away." Damien didn't even look at his daughter. His eyes were fixed only on Amara. When Lily screamed and cried, calling her mommy, something in him snapped. "Enough!" he roared. Then, in a moment of blind fury, he pulled Lily away and turned toward the table, grabbing the cup Amara had just used. Without a word, he threw it across the room. It shattered against the far wall. Lily sobbed. Amara froze, her entire body trembling with rage and humiliation. "You don't belong here," Damien spat. "You contaminate everything you touch." Lily pushed at his chest. "I hate you. I want Amara. I want Mommy." He turned sharply and, without thinking, slapped his daughter across the cheek. The silence that followed was thunderous. Lily crumpled to the ground, crying harder now in confusion and pain. Amara rushed to her, kneeling and wrapping the child in her arms. She looked up at Damien, her eyes no longer gentle. They burned. "How dare you?" she whispered. Damien's hand dropped. He stared at his palm, as if he didn't know it belonged to him. Amara picked up Lily and walked past him without another word. He didn't stop her. He didn't move. That night, Amara sat beside Lily until she fell asleep, gently brushing her hair with her fingers. Afterward, she walked quietly back to her small room. She didn't cry this time. She didn't feel sad. She felt fire. No amount of power or wealth gave a man the right to hurt an innocent child. And something inside her had begun to shift. Not fear, but strength. In his private lounge, Damien sat in the dark with a half-finished drink, staring at the flames in the fireplace. He hadn't meant to strike his daughter. The look on Amara's face had cut deeper than he expected. Not because of guilt, but because something else twisted inside him. Something unfamiliar. He had always believed kindness was weakness. But today, the one who had been strong wasn't him. The air in the mansion was different the next morning. Heavier, quiet, but charged. Amara walked through the halls with a numbness behind her eyes. She hadn't slept. Lily's tear-stained face haunted her. Damien hadn't apologized. Not to her. Not to Lily. He disappeared into meetings, acting as if nothing had happened. But children don't forget pain. And neither do the women who protect them. Amara dressed Lily in soft yellow that morning. The little girl clung to her like ivy, arms looped tightly around her neck. "I don't want to see Daddy today," Lily whispered. "We'll stay in the garden," Amara promised, trying to keep her voice calm, far away from shouting. By noon, they returned inside for lunch. That's when it happened again. Damien walked into the dining room without warning. Lily, still nestled in Amara's lap, beamed. "Hi, Daddy. Look, Mommy made me a flower crown." Amara froze. Her heart stopped. The room went still. Damien's eyes sharpened. "What did you call her?" Lily, innocent, smiled wider. "Mommy!" His hand moved before logic could catch up. A sharp, echoing crack filled the room. Lily flew back from the force. The sound of her scream pierced through Amara's skin like glass. "You don't call her that," Damien roared. "She's not your mother. She's a damn servant." Amara was already on the floor, cradling Lily's trembling body. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "She's 5. I pay you to work, not to confuse my daughter. Confuse her?" Amara stood, still holding Lily. "You confuse her, Mr. Blackwood. You scream 1 second and disappear the next. You hurt the one person who loves you unconditionally." She turned to leave. "I'm done." Lily's sobs broke through her fury. "Please don't go, Amara. Please, I need you." Amara paused at the door. Her grip on the child tightened. Her eyes met Damien's, cold and fearless. "I'm staying," she said quietly, "but not for you." She didn't see the flicker of something, regret maybe, pass through Damien's face. As the door clicked shut behind her, rain fell like whispers against the glass, steady and soft, lulling the mansion into a kind of hush it rarely knew. The grand Blackwood estate, usually a cold palace of power and silence, breathed differently that night. Storm clouds had rolled in, draping the sky in velvet grey, and the wind pressed against the windows like an unseen guest begging entrance. Amara stirred in her narrow bed, a flash of lightning painting her walls silver. A soft cry drifted down the hallway, distant yet unmistakable. Lily. Her feet were on the floor before her thoughts caught up. She didn't bother with slippers or a robe. The air was heavy with moisture and memory. As she padded into the hallway, the cold bit at her ankles, but she barely noticed. Her body moved from instinct now. Lily's cries had always pierced her heart, sharper than any of Damien's insults. The storm growled as she entered the nursery. Lily was twisted in her sheets, tears streaking down her cheeks in frightened trails. Amara knelt beside her and ran her fingers through the child's curls. "Shh, baby, I'm here," she whispered, lifting her into her arms. The child clung to her, her tiny fists wrapping around Amara's collar. "Thunder scares me," Lily whimpered. "I know, sweetheart. I'm right here. I won't let anything hurt you." They sat in the nursery chair, rocking gently until Lily's breath evened out again. When Amara was sure she was asleep, she kissed her temple and laid her back down, tucking the blankets snug around her. By now, the hallway lights had dimmed to automatic night mode. A sleepy haze tugged at Amara's mind. Her steps were slow, her eyes half-lidded as she moved through the corridor toward her room. She rubbed her forehead, disoriented, counting the doors in the dark. 1, 2, 3. She turned the knob and slipped inside. The room was warm, warmer than hers, and carried a faint, masculine scent she couldn't place in her drowsy state. The rain outside tapped softly on the window, and she let out a tired sigh. Still half asleep, Amara moved toward the bed, not realizing this wasn't her narrow twin bed, but Damien's massive, king-sized one. She peeled back the covers and lay down gently, comforted by the warmth. She assumed Lily had crawled in beside her again. The form next to her shifted slightly. Her hand brushed against skin. Not a child's, a man's. Still dazed, she gently drew back, confused. But then the man moved toward her in his sleep, as if responding to her presence. Damien, deep in a rare, vivid dream, was lost in the illusion of his late wife. Her scent, her touch, her breath. His hand reached out in the dark and found the curve of Amara's waist. She gasped quietly, but didn't speak. The storm covered the sound. Fingers brushed her arm, her hip, the side of her neck. She thought she was dreaming. Damien murmured something incoherent, his lips close to her temple. His hand gripped her waist gently, and his thumb began to stroke slow, rhythmic circles. Amara froze. She opened her mouth to speak, to correct the mistake, but something made her pause. Maybe it was his touch. Maybe it was the first time someone had held her in months without anger, without cruelty. Maybe she was tired of crying alone. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. Damien's body curled closer. His breath was soft and slow. "I missed you," he whispered, not to her, but to the woman he believed was beside him. His hand moved to her back, pulling her gently into an embrace. She felt his chest rise and fall against hers. Her heart pounded. Every nerve felt awake. She didn't speak. Couldn't. And he, asleep, still deep in memory, pressed his forehead to hers. In the darkness, the lines blurred. Two people, two broken hearts, one room, one mistake, one stormy night that would change everything. 7:04 a.m., 30th of April, 2025. Me, Bussy. Still half asleep, Amara moved toward the bed, not realizing this wasn't her narrow twin bed, but Damien's massive, king-sized one. She peeled back the covers and lay down gently, comforted by the warmth. She assumed Lily had crawled in beside her again. The form next to her shifted slightly, her hand brushed against skin. Not a child's, a man's. Still dazed, she gently drew back, confused. But then the man moved toward her in his sleep, as if responding to her presence. Damien, deep in a rare, vivid dream, was lost in the illusion of his late wife. Her scent, her touch, her breath. His hand reached out in the dark and found the curve of Amara's waist. She gasped quietly, but didn't speak. The storm covered the sound. Fingers brushed her arm, her hip, the side of her neck. She thought she was dreaming. Damien murmured something incoherent, his lips close to her temple. His hand gripped her waist gently, and his thumb began to stroke slow, rhythmic circles. Amara froze. She opened her mouth to speak, to correct the mistake. But something made her pause. Maybe it was his touch. Maybe it was the first time someone had held her in months, without anger, without cruelty. Maybe she was tired of crying alone. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. Damien's body curled closer. His breath was soft and slow. "I missed you," he whispered, not to her, but to the woman he believed was beside him. His hand moved to her back, pulling her gently into an embrace. She felt his chest rise and fall against hers. Her heart pounded. Every nerve felt awake. She didn't speak, couldn't, and he, asleep, still deep in memory, pressed his forehead to hers. In the darkness, the lines blurred. Two people, two broken hearts. One room, one mistake, one stormy night that would change everything. Morning sunlight filtered through Damien's office window in muted streaks. He sat at his desk, fingers idle on the keyboard, his eyes fixed on the black and white marble floor, as if trying to make sense of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. His mind, sharp, calculating, always several moves ahead in the boardroom, was blank now. And yet not empty. Full of echoes, of soft cries, of warmth in the dark, of the scent that still clung faintly to his pillow. It had taken him hours to realize what happened the night before. When he'd woken and turned, still tangled in warmth and memory, only to see Amara's face resting on the same pillow, her breath steady, her hair wild around her shoulders, her arm draped unknowingly across his chest. He hadn't moved at first, just stared. She hadn't looked the way he always saw her, not like a servant, not like a nuisance, not even like an enemy. She had looked soft, human, beautiful even, and that terrified him. The door creaked open now. Amara stepped in, holding Lily's hand. "Your schedule for today, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice neutral, controlled. She didn't meet his eyes. Lily waved at him. "Hi, Daddy." He nodded, distracted. "Thank you," he muttered, taking the paper from her hands. But his gaze lingered. For the rest of the day, Damien caught himself watching her. From the shadows of doorways, through office windows, down the hall. She laughed softly when Lily showed her drawings. She hummed a lullaby while folding laundry. She touched the piano in the sitting room when she thought no one was around. He noticed everything now, every smile, every sigh, every time she wiped a tear away when she thought no one saw. He remembered the way her fingers had felt against his skin, the way she hadn't pulled away. Damien found himself pausing before barking commands, swallowing insults. He tried once to say something kind, to compliment Lily's hair and, by extension, Amara's effort. The words stuck in his throat like glass. Why couldn't he just speak to her like a human being? One night, he saw her in the garden, watering the plants alone under the moonlight. Her face looked tired, but peaceful. He stepped toward her, then stopped. He didn't know how to approach her. He didn't know how to say he was sorry. He didn't know if he even deserved that chance. But something inside him, something long frozen, had started to thaw. He didn't yell at her the next morning when she accidentally broke a vase. He just stared at the pieces, then turned away. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because he wanted to see her smile, and he didn't know why. The grand estate had always felt like a prison to Damien, a fortress built not only of stone and steel, but of walls he had carefully constructed around his heart. He was a man who commanded respect and demanded loyalty, traits honed through years of ruthless business dealings and a lifetime of emotional detachment. For Damien, feelings were liabilities, and emotions weaknesses. But lately, those walls he'd spent decades building were beginning to crack. It started with the odd moments of silence between them. There were things he noticed now that he had never cared to before. The way Amara's voice trembled when she spoke to him. The subtle sadness in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. And Lily. Sweet, innocent Lily, who had begun to call Amara Mommy with such purity that it sent a twinge through Damien's chest. He hated it because it felt like a betrayal that not only threatened his authority, but in a strange way touched a place in his heart he didn't even know existed. That morning, as Damien walked into the study, his gaze lingered on the frame that held a family photo. His late wife, Lily, as a baby, and him. He had everything he needed: power, wealth, success. Yet something was missing, and for the first time in his life, he was starting to feel the absence. His housekeeper, Mrs. Evans, a woman who had worked for the Blackwood family for decades, caught his eye as he passed by the kitchen. She was always bustling about, keeping the house in order, but today there was something different in the air. She seemed unusually hesitant, her wrinkled hands twisting a dish towel nervously. Damien paused, his curiosity piqued. "Mrs. Evans," he said in his usual commanding tone, "is there something you need to tell me?" She lowered her gaze, looking almost apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir, but I thought you should know something. It's about Miss Amara." Damien's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show it. He leaned against the doorway, crossing his arms. "What about her?" Mrs. Evans hesitated, then took a deep breath, as if preparing to release a heavy burden. "It's just, I think you should know that she once saved little Lily's life." Damien's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The housekeeper glanced around, making sure no one was listening before she spoke. "A few months ago, Lily had a high fever, one that wouldn't break. Amara stayed up all night with her, holding her, comforting her. She didn't tell anyone, but she called a doctor when she noticed Lily wasn't responding. She was the one who kept the situation from getting worse. If it wasn't for her, your daughter might not have made it." The words hit Damien like a punch in the gut. He was speechless. His mind raced, trying to process what Mrs. Evans had just told him. Amara had saved his daughter's life, and he had never known. She hadn't said a word about it. Why hadn't she told him? Why did she keep it to herself? For the first time, a sliver of guilt crept into his conscience. His thoughts were interrupted as Mrs. Evans continued, her voice tinged with sadness. "There's more, sir," she added softly. Before she came to work here, Miss Amara was studying to be a pediatric nurse. She dropped out to care for her younger siblings after their mother passed away. She put her dreams on hold to raise them. Damien stood still, the weight of her words sinking in. Amara wasn't just the nanny. She wasn't just the woman he had mistreated and insulted for so long. She was someone with a past, a life of her own, full of sacrifice and responsibility. Suddenly, the image of Amara standing silently in the doorway, her face hard and unreadable, became clearer to him. She had chosen to help him, to take care of his daughter, without asking for anything in return. She had given up everything, even her own dreams, and all he had ever done was treat her like an inferior. The guilt gnawed at him, a feeling he was unaccustomed to. It was as if the wall he had built around his emotions was beginning to crumble, piece by piece. "What are you trying to say, Mrs. Evans?" Damien finally asked, his voice quieter than usual. She looked at him, her old eyes filled with empathy. "I think you should treat her differently, sir. She deserves more than what you've given her. You're lucky to have someone like her. Don't let her slip away." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with truth. Damien stood there for a moment, silent, before he turned and walked out of the kitchen. His thoughts were a mess. Everything he thought he knew about Amara was shifting, changing, and he wasn't sure what to do with the new understanding. Later that night, as he sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the rain that had begun to fall again, he found himself thinking about her. Amara. He hadn't seen her the same way before, but now he couldn't ignore the truth. She was a person, not just a servant. She was someone who had given so much of herself, and for what? For a man who had never even bothered to notice. For the first time in years, Damien felt like he was starting to lose control. But instead of fear, there was a strange sense of longing, a longing to understand the woman who had, without even trying, begun to break down the walls he had spent so long building. The evening air was thick with unspoken tension, a charge that neither Damien nor Amara could ignore. The usual formality between them had begun to dissipate, like a fog retreating at dawn. He had seen her in a new light, a light that stirred something deep inside him, something he had buried for far too long. Damien sat at his desk in his study, flipping through paperwork without really reading it. His thoughts kept drifting back to that night, the night of confusion, of closeness, the night when his hand had brushed against Amara's skin, and everything had changed. He couldn't stop thinking about it, about her, the woman who had always been nothing more than an employee in his eyes, now lingered in his mind, like a shadow he couldn't escape. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, sharp and sudden. "Come in," he said, his voice gravelly, laced with something unfamiliar. Amara entered, her usual composure intact, though her eyes seemed to have a different spark in them tonight. She stood by the door, waiting for him to acknowledge her, as always. But something in her demeanor, her stillness, her gaze, made it clear that tonight was not like the others. "Damien," she said softly, her voice quiet but firm. "You wanted to see me?" He set the paperwork aside, his hands instinctively steepling in front of his mouth. His gaze lingered on her. She looked different tonight, like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating silence of his mansion. "Yes," he said, voice low. "I wanted to talk. About everything." She raised an eyebrow slightly, an expression of guarded curiosity passing over her face. "Everything?" Damien nodded. "Yes, I think it's time we have a real conversation." Amara didn't say anything right away. She just stood there, her posture still formal, as if unsure how to respond to the invitation. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, she walked over to where he stood, her every step calculated, yet somehow graceful. She waited for him to continue, the weight of her silence pressing against him. "Come, sit down," he said, his voice softening slightly as he motioned to the chair opposite him. The moment she sat down, the distance between them felt somehow smaller, the atmosphere lighter, yet thick with a tension that neither could ignore. Damien leaned back in his chair and studied her, noting how her hands folded in her lap, how her hair, loose and soft tonight, fell over her shoulders. "I wanted to apologize," he began, surprising both himself and her. "For how I've treated you, for everything. I've been cruel, and I haven't treated you the way you deserve." His voice faltered for a brief moment, the words slipping out more easily than he anticipated. Amara blinked, her expression unreadable. "I don't need your apologies, Damien," she replied, her voice a mixture of bitterness and resignation. "I'm just here to do my job." The coldness in her words hit him harder than he expected. But instead of retreating back into the distance he had always maintained, Damien felt something stir inside him, a desire to truly understand her, to know the woman who had been nothing more than a shadow in his life for so long. "I know," he said quietly, "but that's the thing. I don't want you to just be here to do your job anymore. I want to know you, really know you." Amara looked at him then, her eyes searching his face. She was silent for a long moment, and Damien could almost feel the weight of her thoughts. She didn't trust him, that was clear. He had been a monster to her for so long that even an apology couldn't erase the years of disdain. And yet, there was something else. He could see it in the way her gaze softened when she looked at him, the way she allowed him to sit across from her, sharing this moment of vulnerability. She was listening. "You don't know anything about me, Damien," she finally said, her voice quieter now, like a confession. "I'm not who you think I am." Damien leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me then." For the first time, Amara seemed to open up. She told him about her past, about growing up in a small town, about the struggles of raising her siblings after their mother passed away, about her dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. She spoke of the sacrifices she had made, the life she had put on hold, all to care for others. "I never expected to be here, in this house, doing this job," she said, with a small, almost wistful smile. "But Lily needed me, and I couldn't let her down." Damien listened in silence, the gravity of her words sinking in. He had always seen her as a tool, a means to an end, a nanny, a caretaker. But now, as she spoke of her past, he realized how much more she was. She was strong. She was capable. She was a woman who had fought for everything she had, and never asked for anything in return. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I didn't know any of that." Amara smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "I know." There was a moment of quiet between them, and then, in an impulsive motion, Damien stood up. His heart was pounding in his chest. He hadn't intended to do this, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. "Let me make it up to you," he said, his voice firm, yet full of something else. "Come to dinner with me, not for Lily's sake, but for ours." Amara looked at him, her brows furrowing in surprise. "Dinner?" "Yes," he replied. "Just you and me. We'll talk. No more walls between us. We're both tired of pretending." She hesitated for a moment, her expression softening before she nodded. "All right. Dinner." That night, the two of them dined together in the grand dining room, a place that had always felt cold, almost sterile to Damien. But tonight, there was warmth in the air. The silence was replaced with laughter, with conversation that was no longer forced. It was the first time in a long while that Damien had allowed himself to be truly present, not as a businessman or a father, but as a man, sitting across from another human being. For once, he didn't feel the weight of his past mistakes pressing on him. He felt free. After dinner, they walked together down the long hallway toward his bedroom. The atmosphere between them had shifted. No longer was there distance between them. There was something undeniable in the way their eyes met, an unspoken acknowledgement that things had changed. And this time, when they entered his room, there were no misunderstandings, no confusion. This time, it was different. They were no longer two people stuck in their separate worlds, but two people who had come together, intentionally, fully. Amara stood by the door, her heart pounding, her breath shallow. Damien walked toward her slowly, his gaze intense, filled with emotions that he had never allowed himself to show. He stopped in front of her, reaching up to gently tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. Her lips parted, but no words came. She was unsure, still hesitant, but something about the way Damien looked at her made her heart race. She could feel the tension building between them, and for the first time, it felt right. Damien closed the space between them, his hands reaching out to cradle her face gently. The touch was tender. The way his thumb traced the curve of her jaw sent shivers through her body. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. And then, as if the world had melted away, they kissed. It was slow, soft at first, tentative, unsure. But soon it deepened, both of them giving in to the feelings they had been holding back for so long. Every touch was chosen, deliberate, filled with yearning. Every movement a step forward into something neither of them had expected, but both needed. This night wasn't an accident. It was a choice, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The morning sunlight filtered through the grand windows of the Blackwood estate, casting long shadows across the polished floors. But the warmth that typically accompanied the dawn felt absent, swallowed by the stillness in the air. Damien lay awake in his massive bed, his mind racing in 1,000 directions. The previous night replayed in his head over and over again. The kiss, the passion, the vulnerability that he had never allowed himself to show anyone, least of all her. His heart pounded in his chest, the emotions that surged within him foreign and unsettling. He had always been in control, had always kept his feelings locked away behind layers of pride, anger, and indifference. But last night, something had changed, something he couldn't ignore, and it terrified him. Damien's hand reached for the pillow beside him, but it was empty. The coldness in the space next to him only heightened his sense of dread. He couldn't make sense of the feelings crashing over him. He wanted to speak to her, to apologize, but the words felt inadequate. How could he apologize for something that had become so much more than a mistake? He had crossed a line. He wasn't sure he could uncross it. The door to his bedroom creaked open slightly, and Damien's gaze flicked toward it instinctively. His breath caught in his throat when he saw her standing there. Amara, framed by the door, her eyes carefully avoiding his. Her hair was loosely tied back, and she was dressed in the usual simple attire she wore when she wasn't tending to Lily, a soft sweater and jeans, practical but beautiful in a way Damien had never fully appreciated before. "Amara," he said hoarsely, before he could stop himself. His voice cracked, betraying the uncertainty he was feeling. She didn't look up. She simply nodded and turned, beginning to leave the room without another word. His heart raced faster. He hadn't meant to hurt her, but he didn't know how to make it right. "Wait," Damien called, pushing himself up from the bed. He hated the weakness in his voice, but it was too late to stop now. Amara paused, but didn't turn to face him. The silence between them grew thick, suffocating. Damien stood there, his eyes fixed on her back, and for the first time in a long time, he felt small. He began, then stopped, unsure of what he was even trying to say. "I'm sorry," he muttered, the words feeling hollow and inadequate, but they were all he could manage. Amara didn't respond. She kept walking, moving down the hall with the same graceful indifference that had once seemed so distant to him. Damien sank back onto the bed, his hands gripping the edge of the sheets as frustration bubbled inside him. He couldn't figure out why he was so desperate to push her away. His pride told him to ignore the strange, unsettling feelings inside, to push her back into the role she'd always had in his life. Just a servant, just an employee. But a part of him, a part he had never let anyone see, wanted more. He wanted to fix things. He wanted to feel something more than the emptiness that had consumed him for so long. But he didn't know how. The morning sun rose lazily over the Blackwood estate, casting long golden beams through the towering windows of the grand dining hall. The mansion, still untouched by the day's chaos, stood quiet, as if holding its breath for what was to come. But within the walls, the air felt different, charged, electric with the promise of change. Damien Blackwood stood in front of the massive windows, his posture rigid, hands clenched at his sides. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she had looked at him when she walked away, her tear-filled eyes cutting through his pride like a sharp knife. It had been hours since he had last seen Amara, but he knew he couldn't let her go. Not this time. He couldn't stand the thought of losing her. His mind churned with the enormity of his realization. He was in love with her. Not the woman he had imagined her to be, but the one she truly was. Kind, strong, selfless, and beautiful beyond what he had ever understood. He had spent so many years building walls around his heart that he hadn't realized it was breaking until she came into his life. And now, standing in the empty room, he knew he had to make things right. He had to show her that he wasn't the man she had once known, the man who had belittled her, who had let his pride and prejudices control him. It was time to tear down those walls, not just for him, but for Lily too. She deserved to see her father learn what it truly meant to love, to respect, to give. At breakfast, the staff gathered in the main dining hall, the usual hum of conversation and replaced with whispers of speculation. The Blackwood mansion wasn't a place where public apologies were made, least of all by a man like Damien. He was known for his cold demeanor, his unyielding business acumen, his ruthless control over every situation. The idea that he would offer a public apology seemed as unlikely as the sun not rising. But there he was, standing at the head of the table, facing them all. The normally composed billionaire was now a man on the edge of something deep, something vulnerable. His jaw was tense, but his eyes were softer than anyone had ever seen them. The staff watched in stunned silence as Damien cleared his throat. His gaze flickered to the empty chair where Amara usually sat. Her absence stung, but he had made up his mind. Today, he would speak the truth. "I've made mistakes," he began, his voice low but steady. "Mistakes that hurt someone I care about. Someone who has given more to this family than I ever truly acknowledged." He paused, his fingers tightening around the podium in front of him. "I've treated Amara like she was just a nanny, a servant. But I've come to realize that she's so much more than that. She's the woman who saved my daughter's life. The woman who held me together when I didn't deserve it. And the woman who taught me what it means to love." A murmur rippled through the room, but Damien ignored it. He was speaking to Amara now, not the staff. He could feel her absence in the room, but he knew she was out there, somewhere. "She's not just a nanny," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "She's the heart of this family. Without her, I would have lost Lily. Without her, I would have remained the cold, arrogant man I used to be. I owe her more than apologies. I owe her my respect, my admiration, and my love." Damien took a deep breath, his chest tightening with emotion. He wasn't used to speaking like this, especially in front of so many people. But this was the only way. The only way to make it right. He turned his eyes toward the door, almost as if he expected her to walk in at that very moment. He needed her to hear him, to know that he had changed. "I'm not perfect," he admitted, his voice quiet but sincere. "But I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man Amara deserves. I can't undo the pain I caused, but I can promise that from this moment on, I will treat her with the respect she's earned." He exhaled slowly, his gaze now fixed on the faces of the staff. "And that goes for all of you. I've let pride control me for too long, and it's time for that to change. Amara has taught me the importance of kindness, humility, and forgiveness. I am forever in her debt." The room was completely silent now. No one knew how to react to the man who had just bared his soul so openly. The powerful, cold billionaire who had once seemed so untouchable, so far removed from ordinary emotions, had just shown more vulnerability than anyone thought possible. Amara had been standing in the doorway, her hand resting against the cool wood. She had heard every word, every admission, every ounce of regret that poured from him like a weight he had carried for far too long. Her heart skipped a beat. She had never expected this. Not in a million years. The man she had once feared, the man who had hurt her so deeply, was standing there, admitting his faults, not just to her, but to everyone in his life. The man she had fallen in love with, the man she had tried to protect, had finally seen the truth of his own actions. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amara's eyes searched his face, trying to understand whether this was truly the man she had spent so many months hoping for. She had seen the changes in him, The softening, the regret, the realization that he couldn't live without her in his life. But this was different. "Damien," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the room. His eyes locked onto hers immediately. The world seemed to stop as he took a step toward her. He was no longer the man who had hurled insults at her, who had used his power to break her spirit. He was something new, something better. Amara looked at him, the weight of his words sinking deep into her soul. She had always believed in the possibility of change, but never imagined it would come so honestly, so completely. She had no words for the storm of emotions swirling inside her. But one thing was clear. "I'm not perfect, Amara," Damien said, his voice raw with emotion. "But I want to spend my life trying to be." She smiled softly, her eyes welling with tears, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of healing. She stepped closer to him, her heart opening, her breath shaky. "You don't have to be perfect," she said, her voice trembling. "You just have to be real." And with that, in front of everyone who had witnessed his past cruelty, Damien Blackwood reached out for her. He held her close, his arms strong and sure around her, and for the first time in a long time, Amara allowed herself to lean into him, to accept the love he was offering. The room around them seemed to fade away as Damien whispered the words that had been buried deep in his heart. "I love you, Amara, and I always will." The public apology was over, but what mattered most was the unspoken promise between them, a future built on truth, understanding, and the kind of love they had both once thought impossible. The early morning mist hung low over the Blackwood estate, the first light of dawn creeping slowly across the garden, casting everything in a soft, golden hue. The air was fresh, with the scent of damp earth and flowers, a promise of renewal after the night's storm. It was a moment suspended in time, peaceful, quiet, and filled with anticipation. Amara stood at the edge of the garden, looking out at the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to break free of the darkness. The garden had always been a place of peace for her. She had walked here countless times, in solitude, to clear her mind, to gather her thoughts. It was where she had often found comfort when the weight of her circumstances felt too heavy to bear. But today, there was something different about it. She felt a gentle pressure at her back, followed by a familiar voice, warm, steady, and full of intention. "Amara." She turned to see Damien standing just behind her, his eyes soft yet intense as they met hers. He was dressed casually today, no sharp business attire, just a simple shirt and slacks. He looked human in a way he hadn't for so long, a far cry from the cold, calculating billionaire she had first encountered. This was a man who had undergone a transformation, a man who was ready to offer something more, something real. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently brush a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so intimate it made her heart skip. Her breath caught in her throat, unsure of what he was going to say next. She had known, deep down, that this moment would come, that he would finally lay his heart bare. But it didn't make it any less overwhelming. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, "about how far we've come, about all the things I've done wrong and the things I want to make right." She glanced at him, unsure where he was going. "I used to think love was something you could control," he continued, "something you could avoid, if you built enough walls around your heart. But you've taught me that love isn't something to be controlled. It's something to be felt. It's something that makes you stronger, not weaker." Amara swallowed, her chest tightening. She knew he was speaking the truth that she had fought to accept for so long. Her love for him had never been about perfection. It had been about connection, about healing. And as much as she had tried to distance herself from the idea of him, from the past, from the pain, she couldn't deny what had grown between them. Damien took a deep breath, his eyes filled with earnestness as he stepped even closer to her. The sun had fully risen now, casting a warm glow over the garden, the light surrounding him like a halo. He dropped to one knee, and the world seemed to slow. "Amara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve the love you've shown me. But I also know that I can't live without you. I can't imagine my life without you in it, without you by my side. I'm asking you now, not because I feel guilty, but because I love you, because you are everything to me." Amara's breath caught in her throat as she gazed down at him, her heart racing. The garden, the rising sun, the beauty of the moment. It all felt surreal. She had never imagined this would happen, not in a million years. This man, this complicated, cold-hearted man, was asking her to spend the rest of her life with him. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it slowly, revealing a delicate, sparkling ring. The diamond gleamed in the early morning light, a symbol of everything he was offering her. Not just the ring, but his heart, his soul, his entire being. "Amara, will you marry me? Will you be the mother of my child, my partner, and the love of my life forever?" For a moment, everything was still. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, her emotions a whirlwind. This was everything she had ever dreamed of, yet it felt almost too perfect. He had changed, yes, but could she believe in this new version of him? Could she trust that he truly loved her, not out of guilt, but because he had finally seen her, truly seen her? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of everything. And then, just as she was about to speak, a small voice interrupted her. "Mommy!" Lily's voice called out from behind them, her tiny feet pattering on the stone path. Amara turned to see Lily running toward her, her face flushed with excitement. The little girl's eyes were wide with joy, her arms outstretched. "Mommy, please say yes," Lily cried, throwing herself into Amara's arms. "Please say yes. Daddy needs you. I need you." The moment broke the tension that had been building between them. Amara's heart swelled with love as she held Lily tightly, the child's warmth grounding her in the reality of what was happening. The innocence of the moment, Lily's pure belief in the power of love, made everything seem possible. Amara looked down at the girl who had come to mean everything to her. Then her gaze turned to Damien, who was still kneeling before her, waiting for her answer, his eyes filled with hope. Amara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the weight of everything they had been through. She had questioned herself so many times. But now all she could feel was the love that had grown between them. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't without its flaws, but it was real. And in that moment, she knew with every fiber of her being that this was where she belonged. She turned back to Damien, her eyes brimming with tears, a smile spreading across her face as she whispered, "Yes. Yes, Damien, I will marry you." The air around them seemed to hold its breath as Damien's face lit up, his eyes shining with joy. He rose to his feet, taking her hands in his, pulling her close as he whispered the words that had been locked in his heart for so long. "I love you, Amara. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for loving me." And with that, he kissed her. A kiss that spoke of all the emotions he had never known how to express, a kiss that sealed their future, a future they would now face together, hand in hand. Lily, still in Amara's arms, giggled with joy, her little heart full of happiness. She kissed Amara's cheek, and then turned to Damien, wrapping her arms around his legs in a tight hug. "I'm so happy, Daddy," she said, her voice filled with pure joy. "We're a family now." Damien looked down at his daughter, his heart swelling with love. For the first time in a long time, he felt whole. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light over the garden, he knew that he had everything he had ever wanted: love, forgiveness, and a family. Together, they would face the future, and nothing would ever tear them apart. The grand hall was filled with light, not just from the crystal chandeliers above, but from the love that seemed to pour out from every corner of the room. The walls of Blackwood Estate, so often cold and intimidating, now stood as witnesses to something different, something beautiful. Amara stood at the back of the hall, her heart racing with nervous excitement, watching the bustle of some preparations. Her wedding gown, simple yet elegant, hugged her curves, the soft satin gleaming in the soft light. It wasn't the most extravagant gown, but it was perfect for her, just like the man she was about to marry. The dress was a symbol of the woman she had become, confident, strong, and unafraid of embracing a future filled with love, despite the darkness of her past. Lily, wearing a small flower girl dress, was twirling around her, her joy contagious. "Mommy, you look beautiful," she beamed, her small hands clutching a bouquet of white waftes. Her innocent admiration warmed Amara's heart in a way nothing else could. She had come to love this little girl like her own, and now, today, she would be, officially, her mother. The quiet was interrupted as Damien entered the hall, his strong figure framed by the doorway. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She had seen him countless times, strong, confident, and often cold. But today, he was different. Today, I was hers. The man who had once been ruthless, arrogant, and consumed by his own fears now stood before her in a tailored suit that mirrored the transformation within him. There was no trace of the billionaire who had pushed her aside, humiliated her, or kept her at arm's length. The man in front of her was someone who had grown, who had learned, and who now stood with his heart open. His gaze locked with hers across the room, and for a brief moment it felt like the world stopped. It was just the two of them, surrounded by their loved ones. But it felt like they were the only ones who mattered. The weight of their journey together, the pain, the growth, and the healing, had led them to this moment. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. As the music swelled, Amara felt her heart beat faster. She took a deep breath and smiled at Lily, her hands gently brushing the child's cheek. Then they moved toward the altar together. Damien was waiting for her at the front, his eyes soft and full of emotion. He had always been a man of few words, but today His love spoke louder than anything else ever could. His eyes, locked on hers, showed a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. He was waiting for her, not because of some obligation or guilt, but because he had chosen her, because he loved her, truly and deeply. As she reached him, their hands met, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. The small crowd gathered around them seemed to fade into the background as they exchanged a quiet, meaningful gaze. It was a look of deep understanding. There were no pretenses, no barriers. Just two people, bound by the love they had built, standing at the threshold of a new chapter. The ceremony was brief but powerful, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted into applause. Damien's lips curled into a smile as he turned toward her, his eyes sparkling with pride. "I'm yours, Amara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his hands gently cupping her face. "You're mine, and I'll never let you go." Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she smiled back at him. For so long, she had doubted that a man like Damien could ever truly love someone like her. But now, as she stood in his arms, she realized the truth. Love had changed him. It had changed them both. And it was no longer about status, wealth, or pride. It was about something deeper. It was about trust, respect, and a bond that no one could ever break. Later, as the evening stretched into night, they found themselves alone in a private corner of the estate, overlooking the lush gardens where they had first begun to dream of a future together. The stars glittered above them, a reminder of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. "I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you," Damien said, his voice a whisper in the cool night air. "I know I can't erase the past, but I will spend every day showing you how much I love you." Amara's heart swelled, and she reached out to touch his cheek. "You've already done enough, Damien. You've shown me more love than I ever thought possible. You've shown me who you really are. That's all I ever needed." He kissed her then, a slow, tender kiss, as if sealing all the promises they had made to each other. It wasn't just passion. It was everything they had been through, everything they had learned, and everything they had overcome together. The next day, they left for their honeymoon, a quiet, romantic getaway to an island paradise, far from the prying eyes of the world. There they could be just themselves, free from the pressures of status and expectations. They spent their days exploring the beauty of the place, swimming in the crystal-clear waters, and their nights wrapped in each other's arms, rediscovering their passion and love. This time, there were no barriers between them. No walls, no roles to play. They were equals, partners, and lovers in every sense of the word. Their honeymoon was a beautiful journey of rediscovery, of falling deeper in love. And when they returned, there was no longer any trace of the man who had once been so closed off, so full of pride. Damien had become a different person, one who was willing to fight for love, for family, and for happiness. Amara, now his wife and the mother of his child, had found her place in a world that once seemed so foreign and cold. She had not married for status, for wealth, or for power. She had married a man who had shown her his heart, a man who had proven that love could heal, even the most broken souls. And as they stood together, holding hands, watching Lily run around in the garden, they both knew that this was only the beginning. The journey they had started together had only just begun. And it was a journey they would take together, hand in hand, through every twist and turn that life had in store. Their love story was just beginning, and this time it was one that would last forever.